Yay! On today's episode, I'm talking with my client, Hillary, who has done somatic coaching with me for 8 months now. And, I love all my clients equally, but I love working with Hillary. And I brought her on to really discuss her journey and why she decided to try somatics, what her experience has been like, what transformation she's experienced. And my hope is that this will demystify somatics and give you some context and really hear from folks who have dabbled in it and what it's done for them. So, Hillary, I would love to hear a little bit of like context setting of like what was going on in your life when you decided like let me just schedule a call with Jaclyn. Let me see what this somatics thing is about and what was going on that made you want to try it.
Sure. So at the time, I was working at a big international law firm, working in their healthcare division, coming out of a pandemic, which focused on healthcare. It was a bit of a journey for a couple of years, a very, very stressful journey. It was a shocking amount of work. There was a round of layoffs. My team got smaller, so the amount of work we had was astronomical. And then coming out of COVID, all those transitions and then I know a lot of people went through those, but that takes a toll. So, let's see, March of 2022, I got a diagnosis with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease that affects your thyroid, causing it to be underactive. So, an underactive thyroid has a whole bunch of things, but my symptoms were um, like depressive mood swings, lots of anxiety, not having energy anymore. I mean, like I used to be the person who'd go to Soul Cycle 3 to 4 times a week, and like going once would knock me down. So a lot of physical and mental adjustments happening at the same time as like a lot of stress buildup. And I thought I was managing it okay. I went to therapy for a couple months, but realized it wasn't getting me to where I wanted to be, so I took a break from that. And I'm scrolling through Instagram one day, and I come across, it must have been one of your like very first posts. You had a couple that were about, um, one of them actually said, like, stress is good for you. Like, stress, when used correctly, is good for you.
Mm,
And I saw that, and I remember thinking, like, this is exactly what I need. I just need to have my stress, and then it'll all figure itself out.
mm.
So you had a couple more posts in there that were along the same lines. It was encouraging to me. So I went on your website, we reached out, we connected. And I don't know, it was a fun experience for the first couple of weeks. Like I remember we did things that I thought at the time were very eye-opening and life-changing. Like we did this activity where we were kneading a pillow and it released the tension from the knots in
Mhm.
my shoulders. Like I could feel it wiping away, or like how we learned that yawning is a sign of like stress leaving the body. And I would just yawn all the time and it felt great. And I was like, wow, I'm doing so good. Um, but my job remained stressful and my health continued to deteriorate at a rate that I was really uncomfortable with. Um, but one of the like bigger things, I stopped sleeping the way that I used to. I wasn't able to go to bed until after like 1 o'clock in the morning most nights. I was napping during the day, which up until then I really wasn't much of a nap person, which got in the way of my time to work, which was very important to me. Like I work usually 10-hour days, and that's not being able to continue with what I was used to was really frustrating. So the more we worked together, the more we both felt like I got this, and respectively, I don't got this, which was confusing
Mhm.
because I got this part like I'm feeling the stress management. I'm feeling like I'm making leaps and bounds, like to the point where I started referring to you externally as my stress coach. Like I didn't have a therapist, I have a stress coach. Like, and she helps me work through the physical aspects of my stress. And then a lot of times that helped. That helped with autoimmune disease. That helped like tone down what I was experiencing there. I started feeling significantly more emotionally stable. Um, while I didn't quite have like a boost of my energy reserves, I felt more confident about the way that I was using my energy. like focusing on like how to move my body in a way that supports thyroid dysfunction. That was extremely important at the time. Things kind of kept rolling downhill at work. I realized I was getting more and more stressed out. And the more we kept doing this, especially those grounding techniques where you'd have me sit there and kind of feel into myself and be like, what is happening with my body? And just tell it to you out loud. The more it
Hmm.
became apparent that as I'm working towards this, let's use that term loosely, but so many aspects maybe outside of my career path that was getting in the way of my health. It's until the point where it became clear that the only big obstacle left was my work. And granted,
Hmm.
my work was a huge part of my identity. My career was everything to me. And having those like initial sessions with you where we kind of talked through, like just imagining, like, well, what would your life look like if this wasn't your career? What would your life look like if, I don't know, if these stressors weren't a factor anymore? And initially, that was terrifying. That was so anxiety inducing
Yep.
because it caused it just it like I don't know, it felt like it was ripping away again like a huge part of my identity. And but it, after 3 or 4 sessions of kind of towing around the idea, got me more comfortable thinking of like, well, why am I putting myself in positions that cause my autoimmune
Yeah.
disease to flare up, that cause me to, to legitimately
Mm-hmm.
become sicker? That
Mm-hmm.
so it was deeply frustrating,
Yeah.
but it started to feel intuitively like the right decision. And that I think is
Mm-hmm.
where everything changed in my practice with you of recognizing the difference between what I had learned to be right and what I'd learned to be like the smart decisions in my life versus what genuinely feels like the right decision for me, where I'm getting supported by by myself, by my body, most importantly by my nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
We went through the body language lab, and
Yeah.
my my favorite session will always be the first session of the body language lab, where you go through what what all the different parts of the nervous system are and how different situations will activate different parts of your nervous system. And I'm sure you'll tell me what it is, but I don't remember what type it was. But there's one that it activates your adrenal system, which is where cortisol is held. So it's
Mm-hmm.
that big spike of like, we must do something. It induces fight or flight. And with what I've learned about my like how the thyroid works is that a lot of it's connected to your adrenals, right? So
Yeah.
your thyroid hormone, not only does it control your metabolism, but it tells every part of your body when to function and how to function and how much to function.
Mm-hmm.
It's vitally important for a million different things. And it has a very strong relationship with your adrenal system. So
Mm-hmm.
as my stress goes up, as my cortisol levels go up, as my body's put into states of like fight or flight over simple projects like I need to get this email out in the next 10 minutes, or an attorney is asking for something now. I do not have the time to do it, so how am I going to figure this out? False senses of urgency.
Mm.
And then putting it together of, oh, when that affects my adrenals, of course my thyroid issues get worse because of
Yeah.
how connected those two systems are.
Yeah.
It was a huge aha moment for me, just of how like just how directly stress affects my personal health. Like, and I
Mm-hmm.
understanding that like not everyone has this autoimmune disease, but it like opened my eyes up. I'm like, wow, like if it's as bad for me, like even if for like the general person, like this is distraught. Like this is There's not a little bit.
Totally. Yeah. I mean,
Like
it
it,
affects all of us. It's just folks with an autoimmune disease. Like, it's
it's
like the
exasperated
dial is turned up to
tenfold.
10. Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Can I reflect a few things back to you that I'm hearing and that
Yes.
I've also really noticed? I love that you talk about like in the beginning, like you really did get these stress management tools and different ways to like immediately shift more into calm and I really noticed how you'd be able to notice like, oh wow, this thing caused me to get stressed, so I'm going to do this breath practice, and it really did work. And like you would take more breaks, and like you were doing all of those things that we can do within the workplace. And then like, yeah, as you were saying, like you were realizing, you're like, oh wait, like it's not enough. I actually can't just like take some deep breaths and be in this workplace that expects so much of me, and that I it's almost like you had trauma there, which like for many people working during the pandemic, like those were really challenging times. And so even though things had shifted, like yeah, your body still had that kind of hypervigilance, and that like, yeah, getting that email, all of a sudden you're like, well, I have to do this. And speaking to cortisol, definitely disturbances in our sleep cycle where we're the sleep, like when we have energy, when we're falling asleep, like when that's really off, it's definitely a clear sign that it's like, okay, something's not right. Like my system is out of whack. And so I really want to celebrate the journey of like, yeah, you might have come in being like, great, how do I hack this? And then, like you mentioned, it's like, oh, I actually like really dropped into like your instinct, your gut instinct, which is literally, that's what I love about the parasympathetic nervous system, is it's truly our body sending us signals from our body to our brains. Like the gut instinct is real. And yet, if we're so hyper focused on productivity, we can't feel that. And so I'm just celebrating like that it's not like you're like, great, I figured out how to like reduce a little stress. You're like, wait, what do I want? Wait, is this environment working for me? And it took some time to be like, wait, I could quit. I could do something different. Yeah, so you were kind of leading us there, but tell us more about um, how this continued to evolve.
Sure. Well, I don't know, I had this like breakthrough moment. So I remember it happened the day before our session, so the timing just seemed like kismet. But um, a mentor of mine at my job had kind of sat me down and had a conversation with me. It was like, "Hey, I notice you're not doing so great. Like, what's going on? Like, what's up with, like, let's talk about it." And it was the first time someone had really like, I mean, like, I don't know, my boss and my team were checking in, like, "Hey, you doing good?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, good," and we move on, right? But this was the first time someone actually like, sat me down and was like, "I care about you. I see you.
Mm,
Let's talk about it." And like, I frankly had a really hard time talking to him about it because I was so emotional. The fact of like, oh my God, am I go like, if you're noticing this, I really must not be doing.
mm,
I knew I wasn't doing well. I thought I was masking it though, because I frankly,
yeah,
thanks to COVID, had gotten really, really good at masking it. Like it
yeah.
with the right, I don't know, you just use the right language at the right time and nobody's gonna know
Mhm.
and you can keep going on. But and I
And I want
remember
to
during our
validate like how normal it is to feel like we have to mask that in the workplace, and like that we have to put on a front that we're good when we're not. And so often it ends up that we don't ask for what we need until like we're really not good. So you were like making progress, and yet you're still in an environment where you felt like you couldn't be real. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just
yeah,
wanted to,
no, but
yeah.
that's 100% true. It's 100% true. And like these are people I really like as much as I didn't love the job, the people there I really liked. And like these were people I wanted to like me, right? And
Mhm.
I don't know. So I remember our session afterwards was like I told you all this, I started getting emotional and you had me lay on the floor and just kind of like let me like I don't remember what we did, but it was something along the lines of like lay there and just like feel yourself being wrapped in care and love. And it was
Mhm.
just so overwhelming for me to like sit back and realize like, oh my gosh, how long has it been since I felt like someone actually listened to me, since I felt like someone noticed me and cared? Like I hadn't even been able to do that for myself. Like having someone else who like, yeah, this person lives in another state. Like I see them on Zoom all the time, but that's obviously not the same. And for them to like see from afar that I'm not doing well, come and visit and have time to be like, hey, something's up here. That was, I mean, that was a huge moment for me. And that kind of really spun, it kind of unraveled everything that had we'd been leading up
Yeah.
to. Um, I remember saying to you in that session, I was like, why do I choose to stay in things that are like, I don't think I use the word toxic, but why do I choose to stay in things that are, and that was a deeply,
Mm.
I meant it rhetorically, but it really got me. I was like, that was a deeply troubling question. Um, so
Yeah.
that, I mean, that kind of really started the process. I want to say that was October, and by the end of November, I think I was in a place where I could really actually visualize what it would look like. I, it took some time though, because it again that like being wrapped up in your identity thing really hit me. I mean, we had to work
Yep.
through a lot of anxiety around what I should say my anxiety, but we did a lot of work on like where's my anxiety coming from? Like I was anxious about like, well, what are my
Hmm.
finances going to look like? Like, is this going to disrupt my career trajectory? Um, like I just invested a
Yep.
significant amount of time into building myself a career track, and now we're talking about a completely different career change. Like that freaked me out.
Hmm.
Regardless of it was a good decision, like it still freaked me out. So moving between all that, we did a couple exercises where you'd have me sit with my anxiety and ask, where physically is this coming from? And I thought it was so funny that every time we did that, it only came from my head. Like a lot of times when I'm feeling other emotions, it'll be like from my stomach or like I'll feel it like a jitteriness along my skin, something like that. But every time we did an anxiety,
Hmm.
like to, like feeling whatever we call it, it always came from my head, which was this idea. Like I don't know, it kind of set in for me of like how much of this is is real anxiety versus me creating more stress for myself.
Mm.
That was a big kicker for me. Uh,
Yeah.
so and then
And
when
like
it
what's like a
comes
real
to
fear versus like a,
yes, an
or like,
imagined
I
fear.
remember one session, yeah, and one session you were having like tension in your jaw, and like we went there, and it was the fear, and you're like, I know that this isn't like my true self because that comes from a different place.
Yeah,
And that's the type of stuff that you can only like, you have to feel into your body to be able to get to that knowing.
and it the feeling of your body thing is so strange to me, and like this wonderful, fascinating thing. Because when we first started, I was so proud of myself. Again, like going back to like the knots in my shoulders thing of like, oh, I worked this out. Stress is no longer in my body. This is great. To like sitting with it a little further, and then like getting more comfortable feeling into my body and being like, oh, like no, like I don't know. There feels like there's a void or a black pit in my stomach.
Mm.
Like, I don't know what that means. Like, let's talk about
Mm.
that. Or to be really excited about something, just have this like very kinetic energy, like bouncing all over me, feeling, yes, like this
Yeah.
feels like a good thing. Um, but even, I think its best use for me was learning when something was happening in my body that would affect my immune.
Hmm.
So I could almost like predict a flare up, predict or intervene with a flare, to the point now where like these depressive mood swings, the the lack of energy reserves, like the sleep issues, even like brain fog and memory recall issues, like those have all significantly improved. And for the most part, I genuinely don't experience anymore, except for the thyroid's a very fickle organ. So occasionally it just acts up because it does its own thing. And then I'll feel them, but I'll know. And I now have resources to support when it's happening. So I can be like, okay, I'm having a bit of a mood swing right now. I know this isn't myself doing it. My thyroid's doing its thing. We're going to take an afternoon. We're probably going to go take a nap. We might do yoga nidra. We're just going to sit down and calm down. Let it do its thing. Or I'll be out working out and it's to the point now where like I can feel a cortisol spike, which is, again, especially during like high intensity workouts, like that's normal, that's to be expected. My body does not handle cortisol spikes very well. So if I feel something coming on, I know how to shift, be like, okay, that's enough reps for now. We'll pause, maybe do some stretching, let my heart rate come down, then we'll jump back into it. So it's been like, not only am I able to feel like what is right for me, like what are the right life decisions for me, but also able to feel like the physical parts of my illness where I can keep using this word, but like hack my illness where I have more control over it. I have more agency over it. It feels, it's no longer something that feels like it controls me.
You're not just like at the whim of your thyroid dictating how you're going to feel. And it's not like a mystery of like, oh my God, I'm having a flare up. Like, why is this happening? And you're also no longer pushing through, being like, well, I feel like shit, but I have to do all of these things. So I'm just going to keep going. And you're actually like you're like in touch with like, oh, my body's telling me what it needs. Let me meet those needs. And that's actually going to be the fastest way to feeling better. And sometimes those needs are rest and not doing anything, which is very hard in our capitalist society. So, like, this is big stuff. I want to celebrate the heck out of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm trying not to cuss. That's why I said heck.
But
they fly out.
That's all good. So I ended up quitting my job in February, and I did it in a way that somatically felt the best. And I mean that in a way that supported my anxious thoughts, in a way that supported the relationships I had built there, and allowed me to leave with a sense of grace. So I gave like a 6 weeks heads up, which is obnoxiously long. And I got to spend that time kind of winding down my workload, passing it off, making sure everything was covered. During my 5 years at that job, I kind of became like the person for a significant number of tasks that were needed on a regular basis, which, let's talk about that for a second. It is great to feel needed. It is fantastic to be the person for a task or for a project. Like, it feels great to be like that person in charge where people can lean on and depend on you and be like, oh yeah, Hillary's got this. She's great. Like, we know we can trust her with these things. That is empowering. It provides a sense of leadership. The praise I get from others for it feels phenomenal. Like, I'm a sucker. I love when people tell me I do great things. Like, that's great. It makes me feel so much better. So I think that was another big source of my anxiety of like, I was the go-to person for so much. And that probably why I was the big source of my stress around my job was I was the only go-to person for a significant amount of stuff, which made it very hard for me to let go of stuff. Like, especially like we got new team members and they were all really qualified, very intelligent, ready to go. And I had a really hard time with them. They're fully capable, but letting go of that praise was very hard. But in those 6 weeks, once I gave leave, it was this like very freeing of like, I can let go and give it enough time where I know it's in good hands. I know the quality of these projects is going to, if anything, improve because these people actually have more resources to give to them than I have. It was a little tempting at the end when and I had less on my plate and I felt less stressed. I was like, wow, should I stay here longer? Should I, like, this is finally to a place where it feels doable, like, or it feels like I can actually do the things that are on my plate, accomplish them in a way that's to my very high standards, and
Hmm.
this could be healthy for me again. And it took, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes into a session with you for you to be like, but is that how you really feel? And then we did another like feel into your body thing, and I was like, no, it's not how I really feel. It was tempting, but it was really, really tempting. But
Absolutely.
I don't know. Now that we're like,
You know,
I think 2 months out of that, I have a totally different appreciation for what it feels like physically
yeah.
when you're like to be in a place of actually balanced, to be in a place where my nervous system is not activated frequently, where I
Hmm.
I experience stress at very small levels. The only time I experience stress maybe is when a doctor says something to me and I misconstrue it, thinking it's more significant than it is, which is often very clear, like gets cleared up within like 2 seconds, right? But um, it's
Doctors can be
lear-
very stressful.
learning to communicate them is a whole new skill set. I'll tell you that. But it's been, I mean, I'm for better or for worse, I'm at a doctor's appointment now at least like twice a week for the last 8 weeks. Um,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of that has just been letting my body relax and let go. And it was really interesting. So like my first month away from this job was I just slept. I literally slept. That's all I did
Yeah.
for a month. It was like it still feels a little
And
insane.
you thought you would only need like a week to recover.
Oh, I did. I had it all planned
And
out.
it was very cute.
It went very, very off plan very quickly. Yeah, yeah.
But
I
you
think I
let your
scheduled my
body be your guide.
yeah. And it was I think I had this big like aha moment of like, wow, like what I thought was so normalized, and maybe in the corporate culture it is this normalized because I really didn't think I was
Totally.
experiencing anything all that different from what my colleagues were. But as soon as I took that time off and I spent that month just sleeping, you told me at one point this analogy or um, of that when alcoholics go sober, it's common for them to sleep like 14 hours a night because there's a lot of cellular regeneration that needs to happen as a part of that addiction recovery. And like, obviously, while what I went through is nowhere near as severe as, um, as substance abuse addiction, it's it got me starting to think about like, well, how would I then define my relationship with stress? And I would almost describe it as an addiction to stress. I loved being in that state. I functioned best in that state. I was able to do amazing and incredible things when I was stressed.
Hmm.
And then to just not experience it at all
Yeah.
for so long has been like, it just feels like a full body flush, like a true detox. And
Yeah.
it's been so bizarre, like when I'm now in a stressful situation. Like I had a really not great doctor's appointment a couple weeks ago, and um, the way that I was being communicated with reminded me a lot of my workplace, and I was just like, whoa, like this is not like I remember sitting back and like it was a phone conversation, but realizing like this is not who I want to be communicated with. This is making me feel things I don't want to feel. This is
Hmm.
making me feel small. This is making me feel like I'm responsible for something I have no control over. And it took me a couple minutes after the call to be like, okay, this doctor's trying to make me feel responsible for something I can't control. That's bogus. And like that really wasn't good advice. I'll give them some grace because they're a human and like we all have our days. But like, no. Like it was just a hard no.
Yeah.
Like that's not for me. This style of communication is
Mm,
not for me. Um,
yeah.
it was
Yeah. And I think Hillary pre-somatics would have like just gotten really activated and stayed activated.
mhm,
And even like in a similar situation with your boss, just or anyone, not pointing fingers, but like in the workplace when that happens, of like we can just be impacted. And yet you had that wisdom of being like, this doesn't feel good. And actually, like this isn't really true. And
yeah,
like that comes from being deeply in touch with ourselves and like we're better able to discern what's for us and what's not when we have that steady place of regulation as our baseline versus like what you're talking about in the corporate workplace where everyone's just a certain level of activated. So it doesn't take much to even put you further. And it also makes sense that people communicate in these aggressive ways because that can be the default, even though, you know, some people are very nice, but it's like,
yeah,
yeah, you had
absolutely.
this like your baseline truly changed and now you're so much better at discerning and just being like, ooh, not that. Or like I remember there's a time where you started to get a little stressed out about flights and you're like, wait, I literally don't need to be stressed about this. Like I'm making up this situation. And that was an aha where you're like, oh, I kind of like urgency. And I want to validate like we're all
Yeah,
like I realize I love to be really caffeinated and that's because that's actually a low level stress response. Like it 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 puts us in the state of like ha, 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 go 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 and like it can be like that's great short term, but actually if we're always there, it's not so great. So great like yeah, I'm just really celebrating you're recognizing.
I feel like I'm in this big pendulum swing with my like stress relationship.
Yeah.
It started really high. We're now like I over the last month or so went really low, and I'm coming up now, and I'm like slowly getting excited to be at the point where I can get to the level of like that first Instagram story that got me captivated of like where I could potentially like have a positive stressful experience.
Yeah.
I'm really looking for, I don't think I'm there yet because for me right now, like stress is still very sensitive for me to experience.
Yeah.
And I have no problem literally just walking away from any stressful.
Hmm.
It could be, I'm trying to think of a stressful experience. My life is so full of stress. Um, but like something, even something really small, right? Of like an Uber driver who cannot figure out how to get to your house to like take you somewhere where you like to a dinner and you're already 15 minutes late, right? Like the ways to manage that. Sometimes I'll just be like, look, you can't find me. That's fine. Like, I just don't feel like walking to you. I will take
Yeah.
public transit. I should have done.
Yeah.
Um, it the whole experience still has been I don't use life changing in the term of like in the way and it feels very cliche, but it's just a very different mindset. It's a very different outlook, and it's totally different priorities. I think that's been the big shift. Like my priority
Hmm.
before was like completely focused on like how do I complete my task list? One, two, am I making sure I'm doing the things I need to do to advance my career? Am I doing the things I need to do to get the biggest paycheck and the biggest bonus? And am I
Hmm.
maintaining my social status within my work? Um, where like now my priorities are first and foremost like am I like how's my thyroid doing today? Like how's it feeling? What kind of energy levels do I have? I think like talking about energy levels with thyroid is really under talked about. It's it is so strange to be in a body that is physically capable of doing significant physical tasks, but not having the energy reserves available to complete those tasks. And to
Yeah.
have, and depending on what those tasks are, to know that my energy will be depleted within a very short time frame. Um, so it's
Hmm.
like learning how to manage, like, what do I have energy for today? Kind of like map it out first thing. Like, did I sleep good? Yes or no? If so, great. That means I'm gonna have a little bit more energy today. That'll be great. If not, do I need to plan a nap for today? Do I need to build that into the schedule? Um, and
Yeah.
or like, do I need to do things that are resourceful for me, things that give me energy? Whether that's like that doesn't have to be physical, that could be like creative or intellectual energy, right? Like, do I need to go and like play the piano for 30 minutes? Do I need to have a glass of wine and paint drunk because that's um, do I like just kind of like just think about like things like that make me feel like me, like that feel
Mm-hmm.
good to me because they're fun for me. Like when I was like solely career oriented, I did not do things that were fun. I did not do things that were restorative or actively restful.
Yeah.
That's a whole new concept to me. Like this, I love the concept of yoga nidra. I think it's the coolest thing where you just lay down, like do a guided meditation, and you fall asleep during it. That's fantastic to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you don't fall, like sometimes I don't fall asleep, but like the idea that my body is like actively being restored in the 30 to 45 minutes that I do a yoga nidra is fantastic. And I wake up feeling rejuvenated, like I'm a burst of energy. I'm ready to do something. So to have these tools that provide me with the things I need to live the life that I want to live, the one that I'm forcing myself to live, has been
Mm.
really grounding. Like just really like grounding in the way of like where I feel so settled in who I am that I no longer have these anxieties about like what is it like what do I want to do with my life? Like that well those are really good questions to ask. They're just not as important to me right now. What's more important to me is like sitting back and thinking like
Mm.
what what allows me to do in the short term what feels good, and then just kind of trusting that like what's meant for me will eventually come. Like that, like those answers of like what do I
Mm.
want to do with my life will come to me the more I resource myself, the more I feel
Yeah.
like I have the energy to do the things that I want to do, the more that I get the energy to like figure out what.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at now, and it's a really, really fun part of the process.
It's a juicy space to be. And I mean, we were talking about this in our last session of like, we can't have trust and just have faith if we're dysregulated, if we're in fight or flight. It's literally impossible. And so, I just hear how you're really letting your body be your guide and being like, what do I need to take care of myself? And I'm not going to push through. I'm not going to force things. I'm going to first and foremost like be like, what energy, what resources do I have, and let that guide my decision making. And I mean, what a huge transition from where you started. And frankly, like most people don't live their life like that. I really believe it's a radical thing that like if we all oriented to being like, what do I actually have to give? Like workplaces would have to change. Like so many things in our society would have to change if we didn't all just like push our bodies farther than they can actually go. Which brings me to asking you about people pleasing and kind of boundaries at work, because I know that this was a big challenge for a while.
Yeah, I mean, again, like there's something about like there's something about people relying on you, knowing that you are valued. Like someone values you, someone needs you to do this, and trust that you can do it in a timeline that they give you. Like that to me has always felt so validated. That's where I draw a lot of my like drew a lot of my purpose from. Like these are the things I can do, and they're pretty incredible, and I'm very good at them. Um, I think I ran into a significant amount of trouble at work when I stopped. recognizing what I was actually able to do, especially as my body started changing, right? Like as my autoimmune kicks up, I am significantly more tired than I was before. My memory recall is absolute. Like I can't. Everything has to be written down. It goes out in one ear out the other, not by choice. And it started to grow, I think, both frustrating for me and for my team when I wasn't able to keep up with the rate that I was before. Like it's like during COVID, I was working like easily 60, 70 hour weeks most weeks and getting more done than anyone ever thought possible. Like, the amount of praise I got from that was astounding. And as we came out of COVID, I recognized that like a lot of my coworkers, and I don't know where they got this from, but like almost had like a break or like an emotional mental shift where they were then able
Mm,
to transition into this like post-COVID, things aren't quite as urgent anymore world.
yeah.
And I was not able to do that. Like I even remember we had a retreat and they had someone come in and talk about stress and they did all these things and one of these tests they had us do was to have you like where do you land on a scale of burnout. I landed at stage 12 of burnout, which is like as burnout as you could get. um which I looked at that and I said, not surprising. I knew I was burned out. I knew like I just
Yeah.
like there's the metaphor of the like burning the candle at both ends. Like I didn't have a candle to burn. um
It was burnt.
Genuinely, I was burnt, just completely burnt. And I was doing the best that I could with that. Like I genuinely didn't have any resource or support to lean on that that could have helped me. I don't know, then but I still want people to I wanted people to want me the same that they did before. And so like I take on projects that I couldn't, which would only stress me out more, which would only make me sicker. So then I'd be like sleeping in the middle of the day when I needed to be working because I couldn't like got
Mm,
to the point where like I couldn't control when I would fall asleep in the afternoon. Like it just it would happen. Like sometimes I had a fever.
happened.
Um, and then I mean we also need to talk about like how isolating that is too. Of like to just
Yes.
feel so behind in everything, to feel so
Mm,
lost and at lack and like so desperate to be able to
mhm.
perform at the level that I used to without being able to recognize or like have the self-awareness of like I can't do this. Like I wanted people
Mm,
I wanted it so badly that I almost intentionally didn't draw boundaries, which I mean
right.
I I self-sabotage there quite a bit. Like quite a bit. And um
Well, and it's like you were able to perform at one level for a while, and then it became unsustainable, and it's really hard to like accept that, especially when, if you spent your whole life having like achievement be a primary way that like you
yeah,
identify as human and like have meaning, and yeah, that all makes so much sense.
yeah. So
We
it
did this really cool like boundary practice, and I feel like that was the aha moment for you. Can you talk about that?
this boundary practice still cracks me up. You had me find like the solidest wall in my apartment. You like literally had me like run up against it, pushing against the wall, like pushing off of it. And it felt so ridiculous. It did, and I don't know. And I felt so many things during it. Like the first couple times I did it, I was just like, this, I'm so glad I'm home alone right now. Like, this looks
Yep.
ridiculous. This feels ridiculous. And then I started like getting angry and I was just like, and it felt so forceful to the point where I was like, this is my HVAC, like this is the wall that my HVAC is behind. Like I got concerned. Like obviously I'm not gonna like Hulk out here, but like it felt like that. Like I was so like it wasn't agitation, but it was just like anger of like, why can't I say no? Why can't I join this
Mm,
project? Why do I feel like this isn't a thing that's working for me? And it like I occasionally feel this way where like I'll get like angry or upset about something, and I'm like, man, if I had a punching bag and I could just go like 2 or 3 rounds with this punching bag, I would feel so much like I got to the point where that's how I was feeling. So I'm like literally shoving myself up against this wall of like, no, this is the boundary. No, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did some boundary work around Thanksgiving because I was feeling,
Mm.
I had a bunch of like really anxious feelings around Thanksgiving. We did a totally different thing. I think is it the bubble or the circle, something? But
Yeah, we're
you had me envision of like, I'm in like I don't know. I'm the bubble boy, right? Like no no germs are getting inside this bubble. But
Mhm. No bad
you had
vibes
me envision
here.
like yeah, but that's exactly what it was. Like okay, like there's this first initial circle around me, and in the circle, this is all me. This is all my stuff. This is all that feels good, right? This is everything I want. Nothing bad can come in here. And then outside of that circle is like I don't know, a less dense circle, and
Hmm.
that's filled with things that are like just environmental, right? Like they're the things that are just around me that are happening. I can decide what comes into this second bubble, and then I can decide if I let that into my personal bubble.
Hmm.
So that it was like almost like a filtering system. So it was helpful then to decide of like, okay, like I'm at Thanksgiving. There's a ton of people in this house. Like, it is a little overwhelming for me. I'm feeling a little anxious. I'm still excited about it, but like a little
Absolutely.
overwhelmed. And it was really helpful for me to be like, okay, what am I going to decide that I will allow to bother me?
Yeah.
And what am I just going to either completely ignore or let slide and just let go, right? Like, not even
Yeah.
bother to engage with. And that I ended up having a fantastic Thanksgiving because the whole time I was thinking about like, what's in my bubble? What's not in my bubble? Do I
Hmm.
want this in my bubble? Am I going to respond here? Do I just let it go? And it
Yeah. Does it slide right off?
does it, and it was really helpful, and I think it was a good way for me to kind of test the waters of what do I want to feel versus what do I want like it feels more like agency, right? Like,
Mm.
like I am fully in control here. I get to decide everything that's that I get to experience, right? And
Yeah.
what what do I want to experience? What do I choose that to be? And if I don't want to, how am I saying no to that? Like, because it's perfectly fine to just
Yeah.
ignore some things, but there's some things you can't ignore. And learning how to say no politely is a new skill for me. I
Yeah.
am Midwestern. Um, that
Not
saying
easy.
no is without being passive aggressive is odd. But I have lived on the East Coast now for about 6 years, and it's the communication out here is very different from the Midwest, and it's been I think a really healthy lesson for me to learn from other people how to just say like no and it not come across as like being personal at all.
Yeah.
It's just what people want. And it's
Yeah. You don't have to abandon yourself to say yes to something that you don't want to do. And like we don't
yeah,
always have like complete choice, but we often like there is some amount of agency. Like we're not as powerless as we think, and we can say no to things.
it's been
Hmm.
and now that I'm at a point where like again we're like I don't have I'm no longer in a situation where I feel like I have to say yes to absolutely everything. Where I kind of
Yeah.
have a fresh start, right? I get to decide now from the start what is acceptable and what isn't. Um, it's been really fun to play around with these, like even just like small examples of like what is good for today and like what isn't, and like drawing a boundary of like even just like how I'm going to use my energy today. Of like today is not the day for me to go, run a 5K. No, like my husband will be like, "Hey, let's go! Like I'm excited about this." And I'll be like, "Today's not the day,"
Mm.
and it's like, yeah, he's disappointed, but he can go on his own, and I'll join him
Yeah.
whenever I'm ready.
I
Or
love that.
I don't know, other things of like just looking at like as I'm thinking about my career change and like what the next steps are, where I want to go, like a different venue I want to try, different industries. It's been interesting, even just like reading job descriptions of like being like, that is not something I'm interested in. Like the like parts of
Mm-hmm.
it sound cool, but like these bullet points, I'm absolutely not interested in, and
Mm.
I can move on. It
Yeah. And we're,
this and it's just empowering to
I,
be to feel like this
yeah.
is what this is what I want, and this is what I don't want,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it, and that's all there is. It feels wildly simple and extraordinarily hard.
Yeah. Amen. It's like both the simplest thing in the world and the hardest place to get to. And I
Hmm.
remember when you were first starting to think about like, oh, okay, I think I'll start looking for a new job. But you were like, but I don't know what I want to do and it's stressing me out and eventually landing on this like I actually just need time. And for a while there was a lot of like fear of like, but I don't know what's going to happen next. And now you're in a place of like, I'll know when it's time to look for a job. And like, I trust that I'll know what's for me. And you're really able to discern, like, what are those red flags that that workplace is not going to work for me and my body? And I think this brings me to the last question that I want to discuss, which has been, a long journey. And not to say that you've completely landed on it, because I think we're always working on this, but like this process of figuring out like what does success mean for me, what does health mean for me, what does like a happy relationship mean to me. And you discussed earlier how you're like I was so focused on work and that was the priority and now you've really shifted. So yeah, can you just talk a little bit about like what your journey has been like of you getting curious and feeling into like what would a happy, healthy, successful life look like to me and not just like what I've been told I should want.
Yeah. So I used to define like my success in terms of metrics. Like I had a spreadsheet of all the things I want to accomplish this year with like quarterly check-ins. Like I was on top of it. And it'd be like I want to read like 5 books a month. I want to, walk, you know, 70 miles a month. I want like everything was like so again metric oriented. And I think a lot of that came from like my corporate background. Like that's how I define things. And the I think the biggest change of like how I define sex or define success. I was about to say how I define sex. Sorry, how I define success now. Um, success is totally it, it's a whole new shift. Everything about success is rooted in how I feel. So like health for me feels a little tricky because I have no idea how my thyroid's going to work. So I don't wish that like I just magically have a perfectly functional thyroid and my autoimmune system, calms down.
Totally.
But I want like for health, I define it success in health as feeling on top of my symptoms where I am able to manage and manage them to a point where they're not a defining factor in my life, where
Mm,
it's like my management of them is just a lifestyle.
mm,
It's not anything that's urgent. It's not anything that is disruptive. It's just leading a
yeah.
lifestyle that supports the way that my body specifically needs to function. And then success just generally in life is far more focused on, do I feel a sense of community?
Mm,
Do I feel supported? Like do I feel engaged? Do I feel like I am do I have outlets for fun where I get to be
mhm,
ecstatic and joyful and where there's laughter? Um, do like am I able to like be in touch with my inner child? Like can I do silly
mm.
things and feel fun and confident about it? Like do I allow myself to like feel weird and be comfortable with that? Um, success no longer has this like black and white definition for me. And even if I were to like sit down and like visualize like what is like the most successful thing I could be, like I genuinely can't picture what that would be. Like I can't pick a movie frame and say, yes, this is it. Um, it's uh, it's solely rooted in like, do I have the things I need where I can live the best life? And whatever that best life is, I'm completely flexible on. I'm
Hmm.
sure I should care about it, but right now I don't. Um, but as long as I feel like I have the support and resources I need to live in a way that allows me to be me in all
Yeah.
the facets that I am, that is success to me. That feels
Mm.
that still feels very radical of like just like being in a place where
It
I
is.
can be unfiltered and joyful because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it
Well, and I remember like, you had hit a salary goal before you quit your job. And like, so I think that's an example of how sometimes we have an idea of what success will mean. And it's like, it's this income, it's that house, it's that title. And yet if it feels like crap, then babe, that's not success. And so it's almost like you had to achieve professional success, but at the cost of your body for you to come to a place where you're like, actually, how my life feels is way more important than what it looks like. And I trust that if you follow your body, like you're going to find the right jobs, you're going to find the right, everything. Like that's the true north, that's the true compass.
it's been really, I don't know, I keep having these moments where I'm like, yes, I made the right decision because I have moments like finances for me was at a huge stressor point. I was like, I cannot quit my job.
Totally.
Like as financially like strong as I am, like I was just like, I can't like this is gonna ruin my earning potential. This is going to like it all these things that I've worked so hard for. Um,
Yeah.
and when I hit that salary goal,
Scary.
it I mean was wildly disappointing. It was not at all how I wanted to feel when I hit that salary goal. Um,
Yeah.
and but these like it's been really interesting how like even just in the last couple of months of like once I made my peace with it that I was going to leave, how financial opportunities make themselves available to me, how financial education
Hmm.
has made itself available to me, where I genuinely feel more educated about what my options are, um, and how to be more flexible with like building wealth versus building income to the point where like
Hmm.
my stress about the thing I was most anxious of doesn't doesn't exist. It doesn't bother me. I feel supported in the knowledge that found me by making the choices that I needed to for my life. So it's and I keep having moments like that of like I don't know, something was previously anxious about and something comes through
Yeah.
because I'm living in the way that I need to. I'm
Yeah.
living in a way that's supportive of my body. These like the law
Yeah.
of attraction is very real. Feels like
Totally.
um,
But you're like, first and foremost, like, how do I regulate and care for myself and trust that I'll figure it out? And it's like we can try to force all day, but if we're in that stress response, like it feels like nothing works. And so like you're
right.
really living proof of like if I could just come back to my body and do what's supportive, I figure out a way. Things work out. Like, and I mean, there's privilege, there's a lot of things. So I don't mean to make it just like
Absolutely.
go do a
Yeah.
yoga need run, everything's going to be okay. But like, when you really are just like, I orient to how I feel and taking care of myself, and from there I'll find solutions. I really believe like your life is going to be easier and happier than any other way.
I know. Like these
Well, we're
the
getting,
jobs I'm okay. The jobs I'm looking at now are at like a significant pay cut to what I was making before, but it again it's this like idea that if if we can, like, if I'm still doing what's right for me, the
Yeah.
benefits beyond salary are far more valuable than
Yeah.
reaching a certain salary goal by a certain age.
Yeah. Yeah. Like meaning and health are, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so juicy. I think I just want to ask, like, is there any last things you want to share about your journey or about somatics or like what you would tell someone who's like interested or curious or just any final thoughts?
Yeah, so I know that there's a formal definition for somatics, that frankly, even after 8 months of working with you, I still don't understand. Um, so
Same
for
TBH.
anyone who is interested in this, but like, I don't know, wants to know like what is somatics, my best definition for it is, um, it is nervous system regulation at its core. Um, like I don't know, you go on TikTok and if you look up somatics, a lot of it's about like trauma release or like things that sound very severe. And absolutely,
Yeah.
there's a venue for that. Um, my experience with you and with somatics has been all about like stress recognition and recovery, stress management,
Mhm.
um, and nervous system regulation of like, and it's really just like learning how to read your body, how to read the wisdom of your body.
Mhm. I love that. And that's exactly why my program is called Body Language Lab, because it's like, let me learn its language because it's sending me signals and I don't know what's going on. And you're
Yeah.
so right. It absolutely does not. It doesn't have to just be for people who've experienced trauma. We would all benefit from somatics. Our entire world would.
Yeah. I kind of think of it in the same way as like therapy, right? Like therapy is having its moment right
Yeah.
now, has been for the last couple of years, which is a
Mhm.
wonderful and fantastic thing. I feel like somatic, like, yes, obviously, like it's always great to talk to people about your stuff. It's also great to learn how your
Yep.
body processes it, right? Like to learn
Yeah.
your personal style of processing all the things that you feel or like all the things in your environment. Like that's just as transformational.
Yeah. Totally. And then ultimately, like you don't need like maybe you get to a point where you actually don't need another person because you've gained that awareness and those skills and that toolkit. And I mean, I certainly think it's always beneficial to have a space where like you just get to be, supported by someone. Like rarely do we have that. And like the reality is like not everyone can afford that, or like we have seasons of life. And yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's been
I
just
know.
such a pleasure to chat with you. And I mean, I love working with you. So thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, awesome. And for any folks who are listening, if you're curious about anything Hillary mentioned, you can check out my website where I talk more about somatic coaching as well as Body Language Lab, which the next round will be September of 2023. Um, yeah, come learn more. And thank you so much for listening.